Welcome. In our last class, we talked about how you could create custom events by using these blocks, broadcast and when I receive. So I created a maze game, and I'm going to step you through how you create these custom event handlers and then how you work them into your game. This game also introduced two other new variations of blocks that we've used earlier. And this one in particular, for motion, uses a point towards mouse pointer. Maybe some of you came up with this on your own, but I never really fully demonstrated how you could make a sprite follow your mouse pointer. And also a variation on sensing, where I know we've talked about how you can create logic so that if one sprite touches another sprite, something happens. But in this case, this is going to be changing that logic to if it's touching a specific color. So I'll show you how you set that up. So you see here, I have my maze game. I'm going to play it so you see how it works, and then we'll talk through the programming. So if you click on the green flag, you see he goes to a specific point, and he follows my mouse pointer. Now if he goes outside of the pink path, he goes back to the beginning. So that's how the game works, is you want to kind of make him walk through the maze. And I'm going to kind of usually make your first maze pretty easy so your user kind of gets how the game is played. So I've done an easy one. So when he gets to this red block, he goes to another level. And you'll see that is a different kind of maze. And it's slightly harder in that it has just a slightly different shape, but not terribly hard. Same logic. If he touches outside the path, he goes back up to the top to stop. And so I'm going to stop this game. And then I have my control is if the green flag is clicked, go back to level 1. So how I did this, you can see here I've got the main window open where most of the programming is. I copied over the spaceship from the library, made them really tiny, and on the stage I created a backdrop that had all of the elements. So the path is not a separate sprite, and the little box he has to touch isn't a separate sprite. So you can just go ahead and just draw this all on one backdrop for your first level. And I clicked on the rectangle tool to create the pink path, and I selected the outline, and I picked my color here. And then when I was done with that, I drew another tiny rectangle and picked this color. And then when those were created, I went to the text tool and I selected the scratch font, and then typed in level 1 and put it up here. And in the very end, excuse me, I went to paint box and then selected this color and clicked on the other parts of the stage that didn't have any color. And I had to do that twice because it had to fill it in here, and then it also had to fill it in here on the backdrop. So that, in a nutshell, is how that got started about how I set up the sprites. So let's go back to the scripts for Spaceship. We'll start with him because he's the more complicated one. Oh, and also, I'm sorry, when I picked Spaceship, I converted him to vector because I wanted to change his direction, because when you import him, you can see he's straight up, and I wanted him to kind of be pointing to the side. So I converted, or I think he started at vector, excuse me, but if he wasn't at vector, you would convert him to vector and then go over to this little tool here and then click, and you should get the little boxes, and this little guy here is what lets you change his orientation. So now over to the scripts. So the event handler that's all near and dear to our hearts, when green flag is clicked, I set his position to a specific position every time the game starts, and also use that as the position he'll go to when he violates the rule that he has to stay on the pink path, and if he doesn't, he starts all over again. So I went to motion and picked go to, and the good thing about picking go to is that it detects automatically the X and Y coordinate of your sprite. So if you put your sprite where you want him to start and then pick go to, it saves you time from having to declare where his X and Y is, which you see, as we've talked about before, is represented here, which is a difference between saying set to. You see the two choices that we have? You could have done it that way too, set x2 and set y2, but in that case, you have to actually declare the coordinate, which you might want in a game. You might want to say he doesn't go back to where he started, but he goes back to another position. But in this case, I'm having him, when he touches outside the pink, he goes back to where he started the game, and those two coordinates are the same. So the next part was I had to create some motion for him. And our favorite control here, the forever loop, I added that because we will want him to be doing that throughout the course of the game. And then I went to point towards, and you'll see when you select point towards, you get a bunch of choices. Or you can have a bunch of choices. In this game, I haven't set up any custom options, so it defaults to the one choice being the mouse pointer. And I added an extra move step because this says how closely do you want to follow to the mouse pointer. In this case, I wanted him to be a couple steps away from the mouse pointer. So you'll see he follows me, but he doesn't, he's not right on top of me. If you don't declare how many steps, then he's going to be right on the mouse pointer. And you'll find if he touches, this kind of stuff happens, and that's kind of an awkward thing. So I usually give a couple steps distance from it so you don't get this, he doesn't get jammed up and look like he's having a fit. Okay, and now we're getting to the custom event part. So you'll see here another green flag, forever, if touching color. We have to go to XY, and the color chosen is orange because that means he's off the path, right? So I say if he is touching the outside, he's going to go back to the beginning. And if the second set of the logic is if he's touching this color, then this is where we come into creating your custom event handler, broadcast. And we would consider this red little block to be the finish line, and the trigger, or the event handler, to scratch to say, oh, okay, we're done at level 1, time for level 2. So if you go to events, you'll see that you have a broadcast. So at this stage, you are just going to define what the next step is. This part doesn't actually do anything. This is actually the definition of it. And you'll see that Scratch lets you do that because it lets you add a new message. And I'm going to show you what happens when you do this, just as an example, not to use in this game. So just like with variables, you get to name it something. I'm going to call it test. And you'll see it shows up, and it's the definition to Scratch. Okay, this is what this part means. And you'll see the two blocks that go together in the event handler when you create a custom option is broadcast goes with when I receive, because you'll see when you add a new definition, it shows up now as under when I receive, and when I receive is the actual control of the action. So definition and the actual control of it. They're both event handlers, but they go together like an A and B option. So I'm going to finish with that one. I'm going to drag him back over there. So you'll see that I have the logic, and we'll go back to talk about how to do touch and color, but I want to focus now on the event handler part. It'll come back to the screen. So we have on the spaceship, he gets the broadcast, the definition, but the part of the game that actually gets controlled by that is the stage, right? Because the stage, as you'll see, has two costumes, right? This is the level 1, and this is level 2, as you can see. So we want to put the action of your event handler on the backdrop or on the stage, because that's what's going to get the instruction. That's what says, oh, okay, I'm the one something's going to happen to. So you'll see I've added some programming on the stage that says, well, first off, if you have more than one backdrop, you have to tell your game how to start. And so I added this flag when green flag is clicked, switch to backdrop 1, which is level 1. Now you can drag when I receive, and remember we defined level 2, or I defined level 2 when I defined broadcast. So you say, oh, when spaceship touches that red block, we have in our first logic broadcast level 2. So this part has to happen first. So when that part happens, then this part says, oh, okay, when that happens, when I receive level 2, switch to backdrop 2, which is, as we know, the level 2 backdrop. So, pretty straightforward there. The second thing I wanted to get into is how you use color to control what happens in your game. In the past, we've used defining when two sprites are involved and they touch another sprite. But this is slightly different, and just wanted to walk you through that. So, we talked through, we have a loop and an if statement, or if-then statement. So, you know, we've talked about this before with sensing. You drag this guy over. And so in this case, we're going to drag if touching color over instead of if touching, because you know this is the one that tells you, excuse me, tells you if you're touching a sprite. In this case, I don't have it defined, but that would be where it would show up. In this case, you don't really get a choice with the drop down, but you get a choice of the color picker. So to do that, I'm going to drag one, kind of practice one over. To choose the color, you click on it here, and you go here to your game, and you see it changes. So the first thing you have to do is you have to click here in the little box, and then you have to go to your game, and you see it changes, and then click, and that confirms it. So that's slightly different. It's a little bit that might not be obvious when you're first doing your game, but that's how you control the color picker when you're trying to add it to your sensor block. So as you can see, I did this here by I clicked on here, got the orange, and I clicked on here, and I clicked on here to get the burgundy. So that's pretty much this game in a nutshell. We didn't get a chance to talk a lot about this, but there's just so much depth to scratch, more than we ever got to in this class, and I really had a great time talking to you guys about this. I hope that you guys get a chance to work in your studios and work in your projects at home, and also that you find clubs in your area and be on the lookout for summer camps, or also when you hit the 5th and 6th grade, consider coming over to the summer enrichment program through UVA in July and August, because I'm always teaching there, and I hope to see you guys in future classes and maybe even next winter session. So thanks again. I had a great time working with you guys, and feel free to keep using the studio and posting questions, and keep using the wiki and uploading your files. Until then, keep scratching.